So, what happens when a writer's own books get treated like some kind of forbidden contraband? We're not talking about illegal goods here, we're talking about ideas. Today, we're digging into a really sharp analysis by Sampath Samarakoon on Vikalpa.org that looks at a shipment of books stopped by Sri Lanka Customs and what this one single act really tells us about the state of free expression.
360. Just let that number sink in for a second. What do you think it represents?
Yep, that's the number of books written by author Theepachelvan Piratheepan that were detained by Sri Lankan customs officials. He was just trying to bring them into the country from India, his own books. This one incident is the jumping-off point for everything we're about to explore.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down, following Sampath Samarakoon's analysis. First, we'll look at what actually happened. Then, we're going to get into the official reason they gave, which is a whole thing. After that, we'll explore the deeper critique of state power, pick apart the official response that came later, and then zoom out to see what this all says about the bigger picture. So let's just get the facts straight. The writer, Theepachelvan Piratheepan, he arranges to have 360 copies of his own literary work sent over to Sri Lanka from Chennai, India. But when the books arrive, they're stopped dead in their tracks, detained by Sri Lanka Customs.
So the big question is, why? Why were these books held up? This is where the story gets really interesting. The reason given wasn't about, unpaid taxes or some missing paperwork. No, it was about something way more abstract and, as the analysis points out, way more troubling.
The official justification was that the books could somehow harm national unity. Right away, Samarakoon's analysis jumps on this. What does that even mean? Who gets to define national unity? And is it a real concern here, or just a convenient, vague excuse to shut down ideas they don't like?
And that question brings us right to the heart of Sampath Samarakoon's entire argument. He says this incident isn't really about one box of books. It's about the roles that state institutions play, and when they seriously overstep their bounds.
So to cut through all the noise, the author asks a really basic but brilliant question. What is a customs department actually supposed to be doing?
This slide just lays it out so perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you have the official job of customs, regulating goods, collecting taxes, pretty straightforward. But on the other side, you have the role they apparently took on here, becoming literary critics, judging a writer's ideology and imagination. The analysis asks a crucial question. What kind of training or authority does a customs officer have to do that? Now, the author uses this really powerful metaphor. He argues this wasn't just some random mistake by a couple of officials. He says it's a symptom of a much bigger problem, a state machine that is still running on what he calls old, racist, and repressive fuel. Basically, a system that deep down is just wired to be hostile to certain voices.
Okay, so after this incident started making waves, the Sri Lanka Arts Council put out a statement. Now let's dive into how the author of our source material completely takes this official response apart. And the analysis of this response is just razor sharp. First, the statement makes a point of saying the detention wasn't under the really harsh Prevention of Terrorism Act. The author argues that this kind of normalizes censorship. Like, hey, at least we didn't use that law. Second, it highlights the minister's help. But this is framed as a problem, not a solution. It shows that you need political favors, not guaranteed rights. And finally, the statement says rights were violated, but it never actually condemns the act or demands any real change. So the main takeaway here, according to the analysis, is that this response was pure damage control. It wasn't about standing up for an artist's freedom. It was about managing the political mess and protecting the government from looking bad. A PR move, not a principled stand. And all of this, the detention, the flimsy justification, the weak response, it all leads to the author's final devastating point. This one incident isn't an isolated event. It's a mirror. And it's reflecting some really deep systemic failures. I mean, just think about it. Should a writer ever have to go hat in hand to a government minister just to get his own books released? The author says absolutely not. The fact that the solution was a personal favor, what the article calls privileged relief, instead of being a right guaranteed by law, well, that's presented as the clearest sign of a broken system. So, what's the solution? Well, the analysis doesn't just complain. It lays out a path forward. It calls for ending the power of random officials to act as censors. It demands clear, strong policies to protect artists. It says we need to stop using these vague, catch-all terms like national unity as a weapon. And ultimately, it's a call to change that repressive fuel that's been powering the state machine for far too long.
And this is the final, haunting question the analysis leaves us with. Sure, maybe Theepachelvan eventually gets his books, but the system that allowed them to be detained in the first place, that hasn't changed at all. This was never just about one writer. It's a challenge to every single creator. And so the real question is, without fundamental change, what's to stop this from happening to someone else tomorrow? That's what's really at stake here.